Throughout the Middle East, everyone is astonished at what they just seen Israel do. The lion has indeed risen and roared, and everyone is impressed, whether they like it or not. And at the same time, details have emerged of Israel's shadow war, how the Mossad placed agents in every Iranian factory, government agency, and military unit, sending information back to Tel Aviv every single day for years. We'll tell you about the Mossad's penetration all the way into the Ayatollah regime's Holy of Holies and the plot that was uncovered. And speaking of the Ayatollah regime, Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei is claiming that he gave America a hard slap that compelled President Trump to beg for a ceasefire. And President Trump responded to that statement by saying that the Israeli and the American military forces were in the process of utterly destroying Iran and that they could easily have taken out Khamenei himself, but that he, Trump, saved the Supreme Leader from a disgraceful, humiliating death. Israeli officials have confirmed that they could have hit Khamenei in the opening strike, but chose not to. And meanwhile, new satellite images from Fordo show digging equipment near the bomb entry points. Only now are they beginning to grasp the scale of the disaster that they have suffered as Iran bids farewell to its nuclear scientists and anxiety rises. For the first time since the ceasefire, funerals were held today for military commanders and nuclear scientists that were eliminated in the strikes. And meanwhile, the Iranian regime has launched a broad arrest campaign against suspects accused of aiding Israel, and reports indicate that several people have already been executed. I guess they figure if they can't shoot down any Israeli planes, at least they can murder a few or more of their own citizens. Welcome to Boots on the Ground. I'm your host, Yair Pinto, bringing you all the news about what's happening in this region. On Friday and Saturday, intelligence documents revealed in the Times of London attest to Iran's aspiration for an arsenal of 8,000 ballistic missiles and disclose how Israel succeeded in striking the entire production industry. According to the reports, Israeli agents visited every workshop for years and even infiltrated nuclear sites and the IRGC. The Mossad concluded from all the reports that they received from these agents that Iran is advancing at a far faster pace than had been assessed. Well, they're not making much progress any longer. Meanwhile, as of Saturday evening, Khamenei was still hiding in fear in a bunker, while in Revolution Square in Tehran, thousands gathered for the funeral of 60 military commanders and nuclear scientists that Israel had eliminated in this war. Ali Shamkhani, Khamenei's advisor, appeared for the first time after surviving an assassination attempt, while Iran's president, foreign minister, Quds Force commander, and those who interrogated Mossad agents, so-called, also attended the ceremony, where the crowd called for the IAEA chief to be put on trial. But at least they wanted to put him on trial. Thousands of other people being detained by the regime right now will never get that chance for any trial. The security forces are on the move, grabbing anyone who they have any reason to suspect, as well as many people who never did anything suspicious. Iranians are trying to resume normal lives, but the regime acts in an atmosphere of paranoia to foil any possible opposition because their main fear is to be perceived as weak. Meanwhile, Iran's foreign minister Abbas Araghchi announced that the country will cease cooperation with the Global Nuclear Agency and its chairman, Rafael Grossi, claiming they are politically biased. He also advised President Trump to speak more respectfully of Supreme Leader Khamenei if he wants a deal with the Islamic Republic. I can wait to see what Trump will say in response to that statement. Finally, there's growing chatter about the hypothetical scenario of Iran sell-outing Hezbollah to save itself. Candidly, I think that would only be fair, since Hezbollah already sold out the regime by not attacking Israel to distract us from our attack against Iran in this recent war. There is no honor amongst criminals, and neither Iran or Hezbollah deserves any sympathy. In any case, TBN Israel's senior Middle East analyst Mati Shoshani will bring us a closer look at what's going on and what it means going forward. And back in the United States, where I am right now, President Donald Trump reacted to Khamenei's gaslighting by canceling his plans to lift sanctions on the regime and saying, "Victory? I saved you from a disgraceful, ugly death." President Trump was also asked if he expects Iran to allow inspectors to verify that it is not renewing the nuclear program, and he did not rule out that Americans might do so, saying either the IAEA or someone else will inspect. And meanwhile, in the Gaza Strip, Hamas is desperate for a ceasefire after all its commanders were eliminated, and new recruits are getting younger by the day. The population is exhausted. Rogue clans are strengthening under Israel's strategy of attrition, and now Iranian backing has taken a hit. Reuters, in an investigation on Hamas's dire situation, reports it still manages to conduct surprise attacks, but according to sources close to it, Hamas would welcome a ceasefire even just for a few months to crush internal dissent. Even if there is a ceasefire, Hamas should not expect Israel to stop taking out the evil men who plot our destruction. Over the weekend, another one fell. This time, it was Hakem El-Issa Abu Amr El-Suri, one of Hamas's senior military commanders who established the organization's military academy and was involved in planning the October 7th massacre. But, as usual, the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres had nothing to say about this favor that Israel just did to the civilized world. Instead, he simply attacked Israel over the horrific humanitarian crisis in the Gaza Strip and criticized the GHF Foundation's activities, saying they reinvented the wheel when a dangerous plan. Ours relies on the trust of communities and on member states. And Israel's foreign ministry replied, 46 million meals have been provided to Palestinians so far. The United Nations prefers to preserve its monopoly and the system that benefits Hamas, which is a terrorist organization. So guys, we have a lot to talk about today, so let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your boots on the ground reporting to you about everything that's been happening in Israel, together with Mati Shoshani, on day 631 of the war against Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, the Shia militias in Iraq, and all the other armed groups in this region who are acting under the orders of Iran's Revolutionary Guards, who's the head of the axis of evil, or whatever's left of them. And a moment before we start, I call on you to continue showing up for Israel. We are winning on the ground, but unfortunately, Israel is losing in the most important battle, the war for the truth. Day by day, lies and distortions about Israel are spread. So here, at Boots on the Ground, we work hard to bring you all the truth about what's happening in Israel so that you'll know how to pray for the situation. So give us a click on the subscribe button, hit the link, and spread the truth to as many people as possible. And speaking of the truth, we can now tell you some of the details about Israel's shadow war against Iran, which went on a long time before this kinetic strike began. It includes the infiltration of Israeli spies and commandos into the Ayatollah regime's Holy of Holies. The British Times media portal published some of these details over the weekend, revealing for the first time the unprecedented intelligence capabilities that enabled Israel to gather vital information and strike at the heart of Iran's nuclear program. And according to this report, Israeli spies penetrated the heart of Iran's missile and nuclear projects years ago and began collecting intelligence. And according to the report, the exposed documents were transferred from Israel to Western allies, including the United States and Britain, and revealed all of Iran's nuclear and missile ambitions. A senior intelligence source told the Times that Israel began preparing for an operation against Iran as early as 2010. In each of the dozens of the sites that were struck, Israeli agents were on the ground in advance, mapping the facilities from the inside. The deep penetration enabled Israel to identify and to strike not only the known sites at Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan, but also many secret facilities that had not been known previously. At the Natanz facility, Iran's main enrichment site, the agents mapped in detail all above-ground and underground structures. They identified piping systems and uranium solidification processes, power infrastructures, research and development buildings, transformer stations, generators, and even ventilations and cooling docks. The detailed information allowed Israel to strike 7 critical components of this facility. The documents also showed that Iran produced uranium-enriching centrifuges at 3 secret sites in Tehran and Isfahan. All those sites were attacked and destroyed during this war, and Israel also eliminated a plant in Isfahan that produced all the carbon fibers that are needed for missiles, and the large hangar at Shahid Mayasimi that produced plastic explosives for nuclear weapon tests. In the missile sector, the documents revealed that Iran aspired to manufacture dozens of long-range surface-to-surface missiles each month, aiming for a stockpile of 8,000 missiles. Israeli agents physically visited every workshop and factory producing missiles, enabling the elimination of the entire industry that supported the production. When the moment of truth came, in its 12th day of air campaign, Israel struck dozens of strikes, including the Parchin military complex, guidance and navigation systems, and warhead and engine production facilities. With all the talk about how far back Iran's nuclear program has been set, I am personally very happy to hear that the ballistic missile program has unquestionably taken a very severe blow, which will be difficult for them to recover from. However, the documents also show that by the end of 2024, Iran had moved from research to creating an advanced explosive and radiation system and performed tests that led to a weeks-away nuclear capability. Many of the sites were built by the SPND organization headed by Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, the nuclear physicist assassinated in 2020 with a satellite-controlled machine gun alleged by Israel. Now, what does this mean going forward? Well, we have to pay close attention to try and catch any new clues about the situation on the ground in Iran. On Friday evening, the French news agency AFP published new satellite images from the Fordo nuclear facility, in which cars are seen parked near a road close to the struck complex. In another image, also distributed by the satellite imaging company Maxar, an excavator apparently digging in the strike area is visible. This follows an unusual move last Wednesday from the White House, which shared a report from Israel's Atomic Energy Commission stating that the destruction American strikes against the Fordo facility destroyed the site's critical infrastructure and rendered the enrichment plant unusable. The authors of these reports noted that they assessed that the United States strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities, combined with Israel's strikes on other elements of Iran's military nuclear program, have set back its ability to develop a nuclear weapon by many years. There are a lot of other assessments, assumptions, guesswork, and speculation flying all around, but as I've said before, I have personally put my life in the hands of Israeli intelligence networks before, and I'm prepared to trust them right now. I can only suggest that you will do the same in this situation. In any case, here at TBN Israel, we will continue to spread the truth, and we invite you to share and follow us. And most importantly, don't forget to click on that subscribe button if you haven't already. Now, a moment before we go on to Iran, I want to pause for a second and tell you about something very important that is going on in Israel and how you can be part of it. Since the war with Iran began on June 13, Thousands of reserve soldiers have been called back to duty. While they serve, their families and their businesses are left behind to face the economic fallout. Shops are closed, orders are canceled, income disappears overnight, and for many small businesses and business owners and artisans across Israel, this moment is critical. Artza is helping to fill that gap. They work directly with local makers, buying their handcrafted goods and shipping them to homes around the world through their subscription box. Every box provides meaningful support, keeping businesses alive and families going during these uncertain times. Anyone who subscribes is not just receiving something beautiful from the Holy Land, they're helping people get back on their feet. So guys, use the code TBNIL, again, that's TBNIL, for a 10% discount on your subscription. To learn more or subscribe, visit www.artzabox.com/TBNIL. Again, that's www.artzabox.com/TBNIL. Now, as promised, we'll talk about some things that we can see going inside Iran. 4 days since the ceasefire with Iran took effect, and in the shadow of the giant funerals that the Islamic Republic held on Saturday for its senior figures who were eliminated by Israel, the opposition in the country remains in the regime's crosshairs. Brutal and merciless force is being displayed on the streets of Iranian cities to thwart any uprising that might erupt. This regime, which utterly failed to land a blow on Israeli or American aircraft, is now anxious to beat up on their own people to show everyone how tough they are. Hadi Gehami, the director of the Center for Human Rights in Iran, CHRI, which fights such human rights violations and calls on the international community to act, said that like a wounded animal, Iran is chasing every perceived threat in the country with lethal force. Checkpoints have sprung up across Tehran, armed military police patrol the streets, and police and intelligence officials have already arrested more than 1,000 people, and according to Amnesty International, these numbers can be even higher. The organization expressed grave concern over blatantly unfair accelerated trials for some detainees, labeling Iran's conduct a misguided attempt to project strength. The Wall Street Journal wrote that searches are conducted in cars, phones, and computers, and the government hastily announced the execution of at least 6 men. Iran's regime obviously fears a state of uprising and civil rebellion, and amidst the mass arrests have officials in the country claimed that the Mossad receives help from activists on Iranian soil. And according to the officials, proof of this is the discovery of centers assembling Israeli missiles and UAVs inside Iran that were used by Israel during the strikes. Iranian analyst Muhammad Ali Shabani, who runs a regional news site, even claimed that 90% of Mossad operatives inside Iran are residents of the Iranian country. The big question is, who are they? Right now, fingers of blame are pointing everywhere. Iranian human rights activist and winner of the Nobel Peace Prize, Naureng Mohammadi, said that the situation for the Iranian people is more dangerous now than before the war. Mohammadi, one of the most prominent opposition women in the country, formerly imprisoned and reportedly beaten severely in Evin prison, which Israel bombed, by the way, said the regime will do whatever is necessary to consolidate its rule and is taking harsh steps. And alongside actions against the regime opponents, the Islamist regime has intensified its efforts to enforce the strict dress code it imposes on its citizens. A 44-year-old woman who said she fled Tehran during the war told the Wall Street Journal that the mortality police are back. The police even stopped us and questioned us because the socks of the woman that were with me were too transparent. The newspaper describes the atmosphere in Iran as paranoia, after it was again proven how deep Mossad's penetration into the country runs, with an extraordinary display of assassinations and commando forces documented operating inside Iranian soil. The regime has not collapsed so far. Instead, it is adapting, and younger soldiers of the Revolutionary Guards and its forces are stepping in. Some of the younger generation that is now stepping up to fill the roles that were left behind by those who were assassinated are believed to be even more ideologically committed and also more ready to use brutal violence against anyone who opposes them. So guys, here at TBN Israel, we will keep a close eye on everything happening in Iran that could turn into a threat to Israel, and we will also keep praying for the Iranian people to be liberated from the brutal tyranny that now enslaves them. So guys, keep spreading the truth, share, and follow us, because together we stand with Israel. We make sure that the world knows the truth of what's happening and it knows how to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. So if you want to help us, click that subscribe button if you haven't already, and never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. Now, we're staying on the subject of Iran because on Saturday, the WANA news agency reported that funerals were held in Iran for army commanders and nuclear scientists who were terminated by airstrikes during the recent war. The agency noted that this is the first event of its kind since the ceasefire. And during the ceremony, Ali Shamkhani, the Supreme Leader's senior advisor who survived an assassination attempt on the first day of the offensive, was seen using a walking stick. Those whose funerals were held include Hussein Salami, the Commander-in-Chief of the Revolutionary Guards, Muhammad Bagheri, the Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces, Dr. Muhammad Mahdi Ternachi, the nuclear physicist and former president of Shahid Beshati University, Dr. Faryadun Abbasi, former head of the Atomic Energy Organization of Iran, and more. Students in Iran were filmed saluting the slain nuclear scientists as their bodies were carried up on the track to the burial ceremonies. The Hezbollah-linked El Mayadin media portal quoted Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi as saying that the steadfastness of the Iranian people in the face of aggression will be a jewel in the forehead of Iran's long history. Iran does not know what it is to surrender. Let's give a little context to that statement. The Israeli and the American strikes were the first time that Iran had been attacked on its own soil for an extended period since Iran-Iraq war in the 1980s. During the strikes, Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei stayed in a bunker outside of Tehran, isolated from everyone except close associates, including his sons. His isolation complicated the contacts in Geneva with European states that tried to mediate a ceasefire. Last Thursday, after about a week of defining silence, a pre-recorded video of Khamenei was posted to the internet in which he attempted to downplay the damage of the strike and belittled President Trump and Israel. In a rehearsed voice, he declared that the Islamic Republic has won, and in return, it dealt a hard slap to America's face. It is difficult for me to imagine what would motivate the leader of a country to make such an absurdly untrue public statement. It's possible that he's getting bad information from his subordinates who are afraid of how he would react if they told him the truth. Or maybe he knows the truth, but he thinks that the Iranian people will take him seriously if he tells them some more lies. In any case, he made a mistake, and United States President Donald Trump quickly let the whole world know about it. On Friday, he declared that he was canceling his plans to lift sanctions on Iran, replying to Khamenei's speech by saying, "Victory? I saved you from an ugly and humiliating death," and added that he ordered Israel not to assassinate Iran's supreme leader. He also called Khamenei a coward and demanded that he apologize for his outrageous lies and deceit. And in related news, it turns out that Israel decided not to strike Khamenei on the very first day of this operation, even though it could have done so in the opening blow that eliminated military chiefs and nuclear scientists. So guys, we now turn to TBN Israel's senior Middle East analyst Mati Shoshani, who will give us a closer look at all of this. Mati, why was Khamenei left alive, and what does the future hold for the region and for Israel?
Thank you, Yael. Guys, if you really want to understand what is truly happening with geopolitics, well, this weekend, President Trump is the address for that. He has been speaking candidly and very, very openly about what's truly been happening behind the scenes. And the headline here is he's telling the Iranians what truly would have happened if the US didn't step in and try to bring a negotiation instead of continued Israeli attacks. So here's what's really been happening over recent days. As you recall, in 12 swift days, Israel destroyed Iranian resistance, most of the Iranian nuclear program, and many of their strategic sites. The US, on day 9, I believe, of that attack, joined in with the Israeli Air Force and knocked out several of the nuclear facilities in Iran. This brought an end to decades-long tension between Israel and the Iranians over their desire to push for nuclear military capability. But the really interesting question now is, where do we all go from here? What happens next after Israel and the US have dealt militarily with the Iranians? How do we progress forward on the topic of negotiations, sanction removal for the Iranians, and most importantly for Israel and the US, how we ensure the Iranians never again, or at least not in our lifetime, are able to push for a nuclear military program. So here's what's been happening over the weekend. President Trump comes out, and in a response to what the leadership of the Iranian government has been saying, he says some very bold things. First of all, he says to the Iranians, FYI, Khamenei, Supreme Leader of Iran, you need to know that I stopped the Israelis from assassinating you. You should thank me for still being alive. The second thing he says is he had stopped personally the removal of sanctions from Iran, stating that he will wait until there's a full resolution of the nuclear capability question before sanctions are ever removed from the Iranians. So this wraps the conversation of what happens next with the Iranians in a very interesting light. Israel clearly wants one thing and one thing only: no more nuclear capability. That splits into two things. One is removal of all the nuclear stockpiles, and the second thing is no more centrifuges. So let's break that down. In the 12-day attack over Iran, Israel, together with the US, breaks down most of the nuclear facilities. So most of the capability of enriching uranium and all the logistics and technological support that goes to that was removed. At the same time, much of the Iranian leadership, both IRGC, army, government on a spiritual level, and even the nuclear program are all removed, as in most of them are assassinated, and even some of their number twos are assassinated. Then it gets even more interesting. The US, together with Israel, attacks the nuclear facilities and buries under rubble most of the Iranian nuclear stockpile. So what does that mean? There's allegedly, an amount of enriched uranium that is sufficient to create, let's say, 10 to 15 nuclear bombs. We don't know the exact numbers, with further enrichment. Now there's a really big question over how much of that is buried under rubble and how much of it is actually hidden away, squirreled away, as I like to say, by the Iranians. But the really interesting thing is it doesn't really matter that much. The next part of this game, which is the negotiation and the agreement between Israel and Iran, that's really the pivotal point here. The point in which it's clear what happens next: continued attacks by Iran, or an agreement where the Iranians give up their nuclear program, join sort of the League of Nations or the group of nations that act in a reasonable way and changes the history of this Middle East. So why did President Trump come out with these really strong statements over the weekend? Why did he say publicly that he spared the life, or he helped Israel, or persuaded Israel to spare the life of the Supreme Leader of Iran? Why did he personally say that he's preventing the sanctions from being removed from Iran until the point in which they no longer have a nuclear program? Why is he saying all these things? Well, I'll give you the answer to that. The answer is because the Iranians are trying to shift the narrative of what happened and what didn't happen since this attack ended. In their mind, their number one priority right now is trying to regain whatever clout, whatever perceived power they have in the Middle East, and improve their internal image also within the population of Iran. And to do that, they're lying. It's as simple as that. They're trying to spin a tale, saying that they're the ones who won this attack, that their missiles caused a lot more damage to Israel than was reported by Israeli news. They're trying to sort of frame this conversation where it was almost an equal battle between them and Israel. They're trying to state that they knocked down aircraft, that they've saved a lot of their nuclear program. Whatever happened, they're trying to shift the reality to a place where they're not the losers of this skirmish, but rather they're the winners. And President Trump comes out knowing full well that one, every news outlet in the world is going to respond and repeat this message, and two, that it's going to get to the Iranian people too and to Iranian leadership. And he says, you lost the war. Fair and square, without any question, you've lost it. And then he goes further and says, you've also lost most of your nuclear capabilities. In fact, he says, the US destroyed the Iranian nuclear program. Now let me tell you something from the Israeli perspective. The Israeli government has been very, very careful not to state that we completely destroyed or completely removed the Iranian nuclear program. In fact, we haven't said that. What we've said is we've set them back many, many years. That's been said by a Prime Minister, our Minister of Defense, and other personnel within the intelligence organizations in Israel. No one has said we've, quote unquote, destroyed the nuclear program. And the reason for that is simple. Even though we eliminated much of the leadership, and even though we removed most of the facilities and probably buried under rubble most of the enriched uranium, that still doesn't solve the full problem. Because the information that led to this moment and the ability of the Iranians to go back to a bomb still exists, even to a lesser capacity. And because of that, Israel isn't saying we fully destroyed. What we're saying is we've set them back many years, and now we're pushing for phase 2. Well, how does this move forward? So it goes one of two ways. One, we go the quick way, where Iran gives in to the requests of the US and Israel. And for that, they're going to have to admit to a certain degree defeat. They're going to have to admit that they've retained some of their nuclear capabilities, at least in the enriched uranium sort of sector. And when they do that, they're going to have a response that's given in the agreement. And the response will be, we will have supervisors that will come in and check what you're doing, critique what the Iranians are doing. They'll be on site, on the ground in Iran, making sure that they don't push again to nuclear capabilities. An example of that could be that we've already seen initial satellite imagery of the Iranians trying to recover some of the nuclear facilities. Maybe they're trying to fix them. Maybe they're digging into the ground of the locations that were bombed by the US to find the enriched uranium that's buried deep underground and retrieve it. We're not sure, and it doesn't really matter. What we need is an agreement. And what Israel also needs is guarantees that the Iranians won't push back for nuclear capabilities. We want to make sure that they're supervised. We want to make sure that there's a snapback mechanism, as in that they would be immediately punished if they take action. And another part of that is that they cease to export terrorism. The 12-day attack of Israel combined with the US on Iran was a historical, monumentous, unbelievable series of attacks that really set back the Iranian nuclear program for many, many years. And now is the money time. Now is the time to make sure that the Iranians don't get to go back to push once more for nuclear capabilities, that they stop funding terrorism, and that they change their method of operation. And I think on a psychological level, there's another part. Israel wants to make sure, and I believe the US is the same, that the Iranians know that they lost, that the Iranian people understand that their government has exposed weakness, and that they choose not to take this course of action one more time. This region now knows that Israel is willing and fully capable in stopping any threat that comes its way. The Iranians have learned the lesson the hard way, and I believe they might have to again if they don't come to the table in good faith and negotiate away their nuclear program. Many countries in the region, in back channels, have been communicating that they want some kind of new agreement, that they're afraid of the new Israeli aggression, as they sort of frame that, and they want to see Iran and other countries enter into a time of peace that is sort of framed by an agreement that is brokered by the Americans. One more thing, President Trump hasn't just been active talking about what's happening with the Iranians, he's also been talking about internal Israeli politics. And that's something I have to tell you, Israeli people have not been a huge fan of, and I say that lightly. This might not hit international news, but Prime Minister Netanyahu has been undergoing a trial over several cases regarding multiple issues that have to do with corruption or people related to him and their corruption, etc. There's a long story there, not for this show. The main piece here is that President Trump started talking about the fact that Netanyahu's ongoing investigation should be canceled and he should be fully pardoned. Why he did that? Well, there are many speculations, but the main point is is that Israelis are not happy with that. Israelis don't like other countries meddling with their internal politics, and they were really not a fan of the fact that President Trump is aligning with Netanyahu on that specific topic. And you really need to understand that politics are complex in that sense. Prime Minister Netanyahu is across the board praised for what he did against Iran in recent weeks. There is very few that would criticize him for what he did. It's clearly an act of boldness, bravery, and really thought out planning. And at the same time, there's internal criticism, and Israelis are unhappy with the US president meddling with those internal issues. All in all, I think we're in a really interesting season where you get a sneak peek behind sort of the veil of government by what President Trump is saying about what happens in the Middle East. He's talked openly about the threats against Iran. He's talked openly about the other options that could have taken place with this ongoing conflict, let's call it, with the Iranians. And it really helps us understand the world that is shaping in front of our eyes. A world where Israel is one of the dominant rising forces and Iran's sort of influence in the region is dramatically diminished. And my hope is, my prayer is, that that just continues for more and more months to come. And at the end of it, we need to see the Iranians come to the table, negotiate away their nuclear program, stop exporting terrorism, and then maybe it's time to remove sanctions and bring in a new era of peace and prosperity in this region. Now back to Yair Pinto.
Thank you very much, Mati Shoshani, for bringing some clarity to this very complicated situation. Now, let's move to what's happening in the Gaza Strip, but first, I want to invite you to click on the subscribe button if you haven't already. And against the backdrop of reports about momentum in the contacts for the Gaza ceasefire and the hostage deal, Reuters published an investigative report on Friday shedding some light on Hamas's dire situation. According to sources close to the terrorist organization, it needs a ceasefire for several reasons, starting with its shaky command structure after most of its military leadership was eliminated and the growing frustration of Gaza's civilians after 20 months of war that has left the Gaza Strip in ruins. This has prompted an open rebellion by clans whose power is growing as part of an Israeli strategy aimed at weakening the organization, and Hamas desperately wants to put down this rebellion. We can assume that the methods that they use would be very similar to the methods that the Iranian regime is using against its own people right now in Tehran. However, 3 sources close to Hamas told Reuters that its militants now operate independently, i.e., not under centralized command, and that they have been ordered to hold out as long as possible. The sources added that the terror group is struggling to maintain control in the Gaza Strip and desperately needs a pause in the fighting with Israel in order to put down these rogue elements. But even that might not be enough to save Hamas at this point. An Israeli military source estimated that at least 20,000 Hamas militants have been eliminated in the war so far, and that hundreds of kilometers of tunnels have been destroyed or rendered unusable. Another Israeli security source noted that the average age of the organization's militant drops every day. The Israeli security officials interviewed for this investigation added that Hamas is now recruiting its fighters from amongst hundreds of thousands of impoverished, unemployed young refugees. In the days since the end of the war with Iran, tension has returned to the Gaza Strip, and the efforts to reach a deal that would end the war and release the hostages who have been held in tunnels and unimaginable situations in captivity for 630 days. One source close to Hamas told Reuters that the organization would welcome a ceasefire even for just a few months in order to confront those clans whose influence is growing. The source claimed that the conditions set by the Israeli government, including the exile of Hamas leaders from Gaza, amount to total defeat, and he also said that the organization would not surrender. Candidly, at this point, it almost doesn't matter if they surrender or not, because they're about to be totally defeated. Israel is eliminating terrorist leaders on an almost constant basis, and over the weekend, another one was taken out. This time, it was Hakam el-Issa, also known as Abu Omar el-Suri, one of Hamas's senior military commanders who has a long and in its way impressive terrorist career. El Issa, who is a Palestinian born in Syria, previously fought the Americans in Afghanistan and Israel itself while operating from Lebanon in 2000s. He moved to Gaza in 2005 and then rose to a key position in Hamas's military wing. He founded the training and the instruction system of Hamas's military wing, established a military academy of Hamas, and was a leading figure in planning and carrying out the October 7th massacre. This is just the latest in a long string of losses for the terrorist organization Hamas, and on top of all of them must now be added the weakening of the Islamic Republic of Iran, who's a central ally that helped finance and arm it for years. In the 12-day war with Iran, Saidi Zadeh, a senior Quds Force official who was the main liaison between the Revolutionary Guards and Hamas and played a key role in preparing for the October 7th massacre, was amongst those that were eliminated. What this means, amongst other things, is that little additional assistance can be expected to come to Hamas from Iran for the foreseeable future. With this in mind, after the end of the war with Iran, Netanyahu declared that Israel's achievements would help speed up the victory in Gaza and liberate all the hostages. United States President Donald Trump also said that the results of the war would accelerate the deal. And a Palestinian source close to Hamas said in this context that the organization is assessing the risks from Iranian weaknesses, noting the expectation of an impact on the type of funding and expertise that Iran used to provide to the resistance and to Hamas. So guys, here at TBN Israel, we will continue to bring you all the truth about what's happening in the Middle East. So guys, keep spreading the truth, share, and follow us. And most importantly, do not forget to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. But when you pray, make it personal. Pray for our hostages who are still being held in Gaza in the hands of Hamas. Continue to pray for the peace of our soldiers wherever they are, in the air, at sea, and on land. Pray for the peace of all the innocent lives that are affected by these terrorists in this region. If it's the Iranian people, if it's the people of Israel, if it's the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip. Let's pray for a better tomorrow, and let's pray for the peace of Jerusalem.